Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Thriving with Rachel and Dr. Lou. I know today we wanted to touch a little bit on social media and the effects of social media. So I'm just curious on your take on, what are your thoughts on social media?
Well, I think my wife is always telling me to get off the phone. So I think there's one take that it can be a time sucker.
Is that social media? Are you on the phone or you're on social media
well,
on your phone?
I'm using my phone to get on social
Gotcha.
media, whether it's Facebook or something like that. And oftentimes, I don't know about you guys, but I'll just have my phone and then all of a sudden, like I'm looking at Facebook. And
You're like, when did I click that?
Why did I click that even? And then like, I don't even know how long I've been on Facebook. I'm like, just going through my feed and I'm like, why am I like what am I doing?
While you're watching a show and talking to somebody on the couch,
So I guess there's pros and cons to it though. I mean, like we can use it to stay connected, which I think is really important. It's a good way to find out what's going on news-wise in some ways. But like I said, it is a time sucker and it does distract from interacting with others.
Well, yeah, you're saying it helps us stay connected, and I think to a degree, I have family that lives out of state, and so that's a really helpful way of keeping up to date on things that we're doing, if I actually updated it. But I think people use that a lot for that reason, and it kind of helps you so you don't have to be, talking to so many different people. It's just kind of one nice update. So I see that the other side, though, is it really connection, though? And I hear you. I think that's kind of what most of us think, but is that real connection? It's so interesting. Like, I don't know how often you've been at a restaurant and, I was just out the other night and there was
a family.
They were sitting next to me and there was like, two kids on their iPads and then the parents were on their phones and I was just kind of like, you guys are out to dinner with social media. Like, you're not interacting with one another. It was just, very interesting to me and I was kind of thinking about that. Like, are we connected? Like, who are we connecting with? What's the quality of that connection? Even now, like the adolescents that I work with, the way that they know how to communicate.
Yeah.
It's different. Like it's kind of like we've hidden behind this, phone or this device, and our ability to communicate has diminished, especially if you've grown up in that.
Yeah, it's kind of like just natural.
Right.
And it isn't.
Right.
Right. The natural place of interaction is looking at somebody, being with somebody, feeling their energy, taking on some of their emotion or being able to share emotion. Whereas on a screen, it's very hard to like feel that, experience that, or share that. So I think it's really important that we kind of be mindful of our time on social media and what is the function of it, If we're trying to connect with somebody, as you were pointing out, what's the quality of that connection? I think a lot of times the connection through social media it's an update. It's not really connecting. I'm not really communicating with one another. Even though I'm sharing what's going on with me, you get to hear it or see it. Okay, you're updated that I went to this party or we celebrated this or something like that. But
you didn't hear about it.
You didn't hear about it. Like, you didn't get the story
vibe.
Of like, we went to this wedding and it was so cool.
Yeah.
We had this going on.
Yeah.
You miss that.
It's funny that the way that you just described the thing that we miss out on from social media is the one thing that my clients talk to me about, the thing they don't want. They don't want to feel. They don't want to have to be in front of you. It's intimidating. That connection, that connection you were talking about, that most of us who maybe aren't as used to growing up with social media, it's like what they yearn for. Like, they want the connection through the screen because it's safe. And so it's interesting when you were describing that, I was kind of laughing to myself, like, that's something that I look forward to. I look forward to that connection, but I don't know that all people do.
But I wonder how much that's tied to individuals who are struggling with anxiety or depression or using substances to mask or kind of tamp down some of that anxiety and the depression. And that is an easier way to feel connected and interact with people, and it is safer, and you don't have that emotional charge, even though there's certain things you see on Facebook or Instagram that are emotionally charging, but at the same time you can switch it off.
Right.
If you would choose.
So I think it's more instantly gratifying or instant relieving in that way, depending on which way you're looking at it. I also think, like you said, you're so often on it and you don't really recognize when you're on it that, your brain is overstimulated and impaired sleep, depending on when you're on it. at one point I was waking up, first thing I did, checking my email, checking, social media.
Right.
It's the last thing that I do before I go to bed. It's just like such a, a habit when you're doing that. So I think it's important to recognize, there are pros, but we have to kind of emphasize the cons, and like you said, really look at what is the function of it, and is my intention with it also being executed in the same way I originally intended.
As soon as you said that, what's the function? My immediate response was to minimize it. Like, well, there's really no function, but what's the big deal? Right? Like, and I was imagining myself getting in bed. I, make sure that my alarm's set, and it's by a phone, right? It's not an alarm clock anymore.
Nope. Yeah.
And make sure that it's plugged in, and then I hit Facebook button and see, what's the latest thing. Or I hit ESPN and check sports scores and stuff like that. But do I really need to do that?
So, how do we minimize the use of social media? So a couple things as far as like things that I've done is, on my apps are all in the same space. So something that is helpful for me, since I'm always on autopilot, is moving the app to a different part of my phone. So then it's not autopilot. I got to find it. I got to remember it. Kind of when I go to hit it and I realize it's not the same app, it kind of prompts me like, oh, you're about to go do that, as opposed to I'm already on it and I don't realize it. So that's one thing that I've done. I know people who actually pay. There's an app, I think, or something that you can download that actually stops you from going on social media. Like if you've hit a certain amount of hours in a day, and then you just can't go on it. I think you can pay to take it off too, but it's kind of interesting.
There's probably a manual
I'm sure there is, but that's that's another way that I would do it. I'm curious, are there ways that you have tried to limit it?
Well, sometimes we've tried to limit this at dinner, for example. We would put all of our phones in a different room, and then just sit at the table. And so if we're out to dinner, all our phones are in pockets rather than out on the table. In meetings, everybody puts their phone either on somebody else's desk or some other area of the office, so that when we meet together, we're not, constantly looking at our phone.
Put on Do Not Disturb.
Yeah.
Things like that. And also looking at, maybe it's not about avoiding social media, but what if it's about fulfilling the function that we're first wanting from social media, like connecting. So maybe that means making a phone call, connecting with somebody in person, scheduling that time. Maybe it is putting all your phones in the middle of the table and just, whoever's the first to pick it up, like kind of keeps you aware of the interaction.
Or something.
But things like that, maybe it's not about avoidance, but maybe it's about fulfilling some need, which is connection. And, being able to navigate that and be more mindful about that, I think, is important. So,
And speaking of mindfulness, we're probably going to be talking about that soon in the next
next
week or two.
So stay tuned. Thanks for joining us.
Have a good week, everybody.